Hi everyone, hope you're going well. This week, week 8, Organisational Structure and Design. Probably not a too long a lecture, we're going to cover a few things, and on that note, let's get into it. So, two things, 6 key elements in organisational design. We'll go through each one of those individually, and then a quick slide on mechanistic versus organic structures. Common terms used in human resources management, in identifying different types of organisations overall. Okay, the first 6 elements, so the 6 elements of organisational design, there they are. I won't read them out, but that's what we're going to go through now in hopefully not too long. Specialisation. This is pretty much one of the key approaches that managers have used since the Industrial Revolution to determine how to do work. It really focuses on dividing work activities into separate jobs or job tasks. An easy way to think of this is a Subway restaurant where you walk in to order your meal, and the first person will ask you the bread and the meats that go on it. The second person will do the salads. The third person will take your money, or something to that effect, depending on the store. So what they're doing is they're separating those tasks so that people can become more efficient at them. It's more used in production lines or assembly line situations like Ford or cars, machinery, white goods such as washing machines or fridges. This is pretty much how they all work. And the idea is that you specialise in doing one part of the activity rather than doing a whole lot. This allows workers to become more efficient and increases output or productivity. It means also that you can reduce your training costs and ensures staff are easily replaced because the training isn't so complex and people don't need to know the whole task at hand, the whole job. They only need to know one part of it. It's pretty easy to swap and change. There are some limitations, as it says there. Boredom. Like anything, if you do it so much, you get bored, and because also you're only doing the one task, and often in environments where it is an assembly line, loud, noisy, hard to communicate, there's low social and interpersonal experiences, which also detract from people's job satisfaction. Generally, to overcome these limitations, a system of bonuses, or what they call piece rates, are required to pay more money to the workers for doing this sort of work. Piece rates are about paying people for the amount of output that they actually achieve. There's a base salary that people will get, and then on top of that base salary, for every unit they make over a certain number, then they get paid more. That's pretty much it for specialisation. Pretty important concept. Does happen pretty much regularly. This is related to specialisation. So what happens in terms of productivity is as people become more specialised, generally speaking, you get some economies of specialisation, as it says there, which means that productivity increases to a certain point. But then as those limitations that I mentioned in the last slide start to occur, you'll start to see that the impact from these limitations creates dissatisfaction, and as a result productivity actually declines. So there's a fine line between how much you can specialise and how much you might want to do that inside your organisation, as at a certain point obviously the productivity will start to decline. Next one, departmentalisation. Pretty much how do we group jobs together? So common sense would mean that if you've worked in businesses, you sort of know that all the HR people work in the HR department. All of the accounting people work in the accounts department, all of the marketing people work in the marketing department. That's a nice easy way to departmentalise an organisation, and that's known as the functional approach. By putting people that are based on their own jobs or their functions within an organisation, we'd call that the functional departmentalisation model. The next one there that you see, product. this is pretty straightforward as well. Imagine a company like LG or Samsung. They'd probably have functional areas. They'd still have marketing, accounting, and so forth. But those functional areas probably come under, in many cases, their product type. So you might have one product division or a type of product of ships. Samsung makes a lot of ships. Another product might be TVs. Another product might be mobile phones. So if you split the products that Samsung makes into different areas, that's how you departmentalize the Samsung. Customers, this is fairly common. We might look at customers as a way of ensuring that we can serve them better by splitting them into different departments or different areas of responsibility, if that makes more sense. So if we've got a business, maybe, well, I'll use Samsung again. If we've got a business like Samsung, we might have our retail customers, you, me, the people that come in off the street to buy a mobile phone or a TV. But we might also have our commercial customers, those people that are buying ships, those people that are buying, I'll just say ships at the moment. And then I'll say the next option might be for a customer split would be the warehouse type, or the big purchasing customers, people that, or organisations that are purchasing a lot of their stock. And that might mean that they are warehousing customers or large retailers. So in Samsung, we might split our customers or departmentalise in the retail customer, the large customer, such as a retail chain, or in the shipbuilding for specific clients. Geographic, this is a pretty easy one based on geographic location. In Australia is an easy one because we have such a large nation that we can't really run things very efficiently from one head office based in, say, Melbourne. So what we do is we split up the company into the geographic locations, and quite simply in Australia, that is the states. So you'd have the Queensland area or Queensland region, you'd have New South Wales, Victoria. Now, it's not that easy because sometimes the organisations will split the Queensland and Northern Territory and actually put them together. It might be Victoria and New South Wales, or Victoria and South Australia. That's a common one. We get into some issues then when things like Tweed Heads and the Gold Coast, that might be run out of Queensland in some businesses, but in others it'll be run out of New South Wales, out of Sydney. So geographic is a fairly common one. Now, process is very similar to product in the sense that you're thinking more about the product that you're going to ultimately make, but it's the process we use to make it. It might be that, forgive me, it's probably a bit vague, but the customer that we need to talk to goes through an online process. So we might group them as online customers, or we might group them as walk-in customers, like in a Telstra shop, for example, when you go in to buy a phone. So we might departmentalise people based on that process. That's it for departmentalisation. Quick and sweet. One thing all organisations have is the authority and responsibility decisions to be made. The rights inherent in a managerial position to give orders and expect the orders to be obeyed. So authority. If you've been given a role as a manager, you have that right to expect orders to be to expect orders to be obeyed. It's related to one's position within the organisation and has nothing to do with the personal characteristics of an individual manager. This is more that those personal characteristics are probably more like leadership or something to that effect. Line authority entitles a manager to direct the work of an employee. So what that means is, if we're talking in a hierarchy where someone is my manager, that means they have line authority over me. They'll supervise my work. They'll check to make sure it's okay. They'll direct me to complete certain tasks, and they'll have the authority to do that. Staff authority, these are positions that, as it says, created to support line authority, but they'd be more like positions of HR managers, for example. As a manager, I might not report directly to the HR department. The HR department would be there to assist my manager to manage me and my peers in that group. Chain of command, the line of authority extending from upper to lower levels of organisations. So I used an example a few times in some classes about Sheraton, and the chain of command in the old days went from restaurant waiter to the restaurant assistant manager. Sorry, I'll start again. Restaurant waiter to restaurant team leader to assistant manager of the restaurant to manager of the restaurant to assistant food and beverage manager to food and beverage manager to assistant hotel manager to hotel manager. And that would be the way of giving an example of a chain of command. The last one there, responsibility. So different to authority, obviously, an obligation to perform the assigned duties. And as you can see there, underlined for good reason, allocating authority without responsibility creates opportunities for abuse. It would be like saying, here, do this, but you're not really responsible for it or accountable for it. It'd be just too easy to not do it or shrug it off or get away from it some way. Span of control, another critical area about or critical design factor in your decisions about how to structure your organisation. Determines how closely a manager can monitor employees, and very early on in the days, managers favoured small spans. This is because it was harder to control the wider spans due to largely the implementation of technology. I guess putting that another way, because technology has become so prevalent in our workplaces, it's easier to control more people at once. An example of these is a tall span of control, or a tall hierarchy with a narrow span of control. So the employees down the bottom, fairly narrow, but the hierarchy is tall. Lots of different rungs in that hierarchy. Think of the Sheraton example that I just gave. On the other hand, we have a wide or a flat structure. This is far more common today. Far fewer levels in the hierarchy controlling or monitoring more employees. Decentralisation and centralisation, again, critical to the decision making within organisations. Centralised organisations tend to put all of their decision making at the top. It would be like that, again, the Sheraton example. If I was a team leader in a restaurant, to get a decision in a centralised workplace, I would have to go up all of those rungs of management to get to the hotel manager. Pretty impractical for some decisions. On the other hand, decentralisation allows lower level managers to provide input or actually make those decisions. So many companies would have policies to determine the level of centralisation and decentralisation, and we'll see that in the next couple of slides. And in an example would be that if I was in a geographical departmentalisation where I've got New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria, it's likely that the decisions would be made at each different state level rather than in head office, say in Melbourne. There'd still be policy to govern those decisions, but it would be expected that people or managers in New South Wales might have a different need or different set of environmental circumstances that required them to do things a bit differently than, say, up in Queensland. And the easiest way to think about it is as a continuum. So it's not that you are decentralised or not decentralised. At some point you probably could make that decision, but it's more how centralised you are versus how decentralised you are. So there is essentially no organisation is completely centralised or completely decentralised. It's often a combination, a bit of both. Formalisation, the last one of the six, how standardised an organisation's jobs are and to what extent do they have employee policies and rules to guide behaviour. back in the early days, highly formalised. The idea was that if you can get people to follow rules quite specifically, then you can guarantee quality, you can guarantee consistency. Think about McDonald's in this regard. It's a very formalised organisation in the sense that there are procedures and policies for everything that McDonald's does, so that they can ensure consistency and quality of product essentially around the world. Last one, mechanistic versus organic organisation. So have a look down at the lists there. Mechanistic, rigid hierarchical relationships. What this means is that in my chain of command, I'm unable to go across. I can't, if I was the worker in the marketing department, I would need to discuss my concerns or ideas or so forth with the marketing department manager. It would be unexpected or even culturally inappropriate for me to discuss my ideas or something, or problems or controversies with someone, say, in the human resources department. I'd be expected to go to my manager, talk to them about it, and then if whatever I was discussing required input from another area inside the organisation, it would be up to my manager to go across and make those decisions and deal with those relationships. Fixed duties, usually seen as being highly formalised. Oh, that's the next one. Many rules, again, highly formalised. You'd be doing very little. It'd be probably a highly specialised workplace as well, where you've split the duties into very small job tasks that people can do, with significant policy or rules around them. Centralised decision authority, so the decision is generally made at the top and filtered down. And finally, they're taller structures. So you can see there that triangle, that triangle indicates that there'd be a lot of rungs in the hierarchy, or a lot of levels in the hierarchy. It would also probably mean that the spans of control for each manager in those rungs is actually quite small. That means that they don't have too many people to manage at any one time. So that's mechanistic versus the organic organisation. So collaboration, both vertical and horizontal. So I'd be expected to be able to talk to the HR people, even if I maybe haven't spoken to my marketing manager already about those issues. The duties are adaptable because I'm expected to fill in and fit in and help out maybe with other areas of the organisation. I'd have a lot more scope for doing different jobs inside the organisation. Few rules versus many rules, as you can see there. Mechanistic was many, organic is few. This means that I'm probably allowing my staff to use their autonomy and their own decision making, for example, to get things done. Very similar to collaboration, informal communication. I can just have a chat with a colleague in another area and it wouldn't be looked on so badly as it is or would be in a mechanistic organisation where you've got those formalised communication channels. Lastly, decentralised decision authority. I'd be doing exactly what I said for the previous couple of slides. I'd be letting the people at the coalface or at different levels in my organisation make decisions that they were competent to make. Flatter structures, like that slide that I showed about 4 ago. Flatter structures meaning lower levels of the hierarchy, more staff under one person's control, that is a wider span of control, to ensure that the organisation can deliver on its objectives. Now, why would you have one or the other? Mechanistic organisations tend to find themselves in fairly stable, unchanging environments with fairly high levels of certainty. So maybe a retailing type organisation or McDonald's in fast food, not too unrealistic. Organic structures tend to be in far more dynamic, highly changing, uncertain environments. So for example, technology, creative industries, things like that usually require a far more dynamic approach to getting the job done and meeting those organisational objectives. Okay. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Cheers for listening this far. Next week we've got managing change and innovation. Quite an interesting one, if I do say so myself. Thanks for your time. All the best. Have a great break if you can. Bye bye.